Because last time it didn't record, the video didn't. Do you know if it's recorded? Oh, okay.
Okay, so it should be typically, okay. So good evening, everybody. We're going to call the meeting to order, and the first item is to approve the action items, or approval of action minutes from last meeting, the June 14th meeting. So if you all can take a moment to review.
I move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second it.
So how many in favor? How many opposed? No, I abstained because I wasn't here, so okay. Okay, and the next item is taking public comment on any item that's, or on any issue that's not on the existing agenda. So if anybody has a public comment to make? Okay, seeing nobody oh, there is, okay. Sure. Mm-hmm. If you could just state.
For something not on tonight's agenda.
It's not. Yeah, that was quick. Hi, I'm Jackie Hermes Fletcher, and I'm one of the steering committee of the Oceanview Community Organic Garden, the only community garden in Albany. And we are really grateful for helping us in every way we can, the way you've helped us before. But we'd like to request from you a very important work order for our community garden to survive. The willow trees along the entire south side of our community garden are completely shading all the plants there, and they're growing right down into the plots. This makes the garden very undesirable for people, and we have gardeners leaving all the time because they cannot grow plants there. We've been through so many different avenues trying to fix this, and we really are starting to ask you to help us, the commission. We're imploring you to find a way to have these trees cut back from our community garden as soon as you can. We have requested for years to have these willows really trimmed back, not cut down or topped, just trimmed back from our garden so we can get sunlight there. They are like weeds. We've tried ourselves, and we just don't have the expertise or manpower for such a job unless we just hired somebody to come out there and cut them back, and that's pretty much where we are right now. I know we can't do that, but we feel really frustrated. There's also immediate safety issues because some branches have fallen down onto the ground, huge branches, and we have kids in the garden, and that could hit them and hurt them, or some of our gardeners. And in 2008, this body right here, the Parks and Rec Commission, is the one who voted to make this a community garden. And now it's in danger from the shade destroying its essence. So we're depending on you to come up with a solution. We've been to the Recreation Department. Shelley's tried to help us. We've been to the UC. There's been lots of people trying to help us. I feel something can be done with you, possibly. Thank you for please having a solution, and I hope I can hear from you. Is there a way I can hear from you on this issue?
Actually, the Brown Act excludes us from being able to make a comment on an item that's not explicitly noticed, but we can certainly talk about adding it to an agenda item for a future meeting.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for all you've done for us.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments? Okay, so I'm going to move along to announcements from Shelley.
Okay, I have a couple announcements for you. If you recall, we've had the California Rare Fruit Growers have been the volunteer group maintaining the fruit and nut trees along the Ohlone Greenway. And the original man that we've been working with, Barth, has moved to Southern California. But he has left us in great hands with a group of about 3 to 4 people from that organization that will take over for him. And so we're excited to work with them. We're actually going to be working with them on our next Friends of Albany Parks event, which is on July 21st in the Ohlone Greenway, and it's at 9 a.m. We'll be doing mulching and watering of all the various trees along the Greenway. And then just 4th of July, is one of the City of Recreation and Community Services events, and it's probably one of the biggest, well-attended ones we've had. I think the only one that beat it is 2015. And I just wanted to definitely say thanks to the rec staff, but all the volunteers that worked that day. We had a wonderful crew. And then the organizations that we work with to put it on, the Albany Chamber of Commerce, the Lions Club, and a few of the other vendors. They all came together, and it was just a, good old fun event for Albany. And those are all the announcements that I have.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment. I was only able to stop by for a little bit, but the 4th of July event was wonderful, and I saw so many people from Albany enjoying themselves, so kudos.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment? No? Okay, so we'll move along then to our first item, which is Girl Scout Troop 30119, the Silver Award Project, free mini diversity libraries, and members of the troop will present their project proposal to the commission. So, like to step up? And if you want to say your names, and then you can present, please.
Hello, we are Troop 30119, and we are here to present our idea of free diversity libraries to you. We would like you to allow us to place the library in a public place in Albany.
I'm Aniansi Quintero. I'm going to the 9th grade at Albany High School.
I'm Francesca Nicosia, and I'm also going into 9th grade at Albany High School.
I'm Alma Culverwell, and I'm also going into 9th grade at Albany High School.
I'm Bridget Hale, and I'm going into 7th grade at Albany Middle School.
And our troop leader is Louise Burhow.
And our project advisor, is Stacy Maldonado. Okay, so the reason why we are doing this project for you guys is we are trying to earn our Silver Award, which is the highest award that a cadet can earn. And so the minimum amount of hours for this project is 50 hours per girl. And the project must be sustainable and have a long-lasting positive impact on the community.
So a free diversity library is a mini library that is in the shape of a house, and it basically, you can go to it and just take a book for free or leave a book. And you could do both. And the books inside of our libraries have diverse authors, characters, or themes, unlike the books that you may, or unlike the libraries that you may be seeing around town in Albany.
The reason that we chose to do free diversity libraries is because there's a lot of underrepresentation within the Black, Latino, Indian, Asian, and LGBTQ communities. They tend to lack the role models that are necessary for young people to be able to achieve what they want to. And we think that books could be mirrors and doors. Mirrors because you can see yourself reflected within a character in a book, and doors because it's an opening for you to be able to see another community. As you can see, a majority of main characters are white and cisgender.
We've currently been in the process of building the libraries from scratch. We have gotten the materials through donations and using tools that have been lent to us by our parents. These construction is happening in Francesca's garage, and we have been getting help from family members willing to volunteer. We've done everything from measuring twice and cutting once, and using a jigsaw to cut the actual pieces of plywood. These are some pictures of us building libraries.
So we've already made a prototype of a free diversity library, but we've decided to make a new one that will be smaller. We will work on the installation, and Shelley Putzer will have Public Works there to assist and help make sure that it is done properly. So our library is going to look similar to this one, and the measurements of this are 16 inches is the depth, the height is 20, the width is 18 inches, and the post height is 40 inches.
So our two preferred locations for this project are the Loop and the Parklet in front of As You Wish, but we're also open to any other good ideas that you think would be an ideal place to put the library.
Today we went with Shelley to look at where the loop is going to be built, and we found a place that would be ideal for our library, which is right here near this tree, and we would plan to have it facing out towards the greenway so that so people walking or biking by would have good access to it, and same with people on either side.
So we realized that the library will not be able to sustain itself since people will leave more books than they take. Take more books than they leave. But I live less than a block away from the loop, and Bridget also lives really close. And Aniansi lives really close to As You Wish, the Parklet, and Alma lives close to all of them. We have contacted some groups to see if they would be willing to help sustain it, and those groups are the Albany Black Parent Group, Las Familias Latinas de Albany Group, the Albany Middle School Best Buddies, and the Albany High School Best Buddies. We also have contacted a publisher who said she would be willing to help donate some books that are diverse.
The library will be ready to be installed before school starts, and we'd really appreciate it if you were able to approve our project as soon as possible, so that way it could be put in before September, but we're also flexible with our time.
Thank you for your time, and thanks for considering our idea.
Thank you. And can you all stay up there for questions? So we may have some questions for you. Does anybody have any questions?
I just wanted to clarify, would you like to ideally put in both libraries, or did you want to put in one library, and if just one, which was your preferred location, the Loop?
Well, our preferred location would be the Loop, and we were thinking of just doing one, but if one is really easily done and we can just quickly do it, then we could also do two if that works.
I was curious about if I really like the idea of it being specifically for diverse books, and it sounds like you've already come up with this great plan about how you can ensure that happens. I'm really impressed with all the community groups you've already reached out to and how well thought out this plan is. Curious if the actual structure itself will say something about them being specifically diverse, books of that type.
If you've seen the other little free libraries throughout Albany, they have a sticker on them. We're thinking about maybe putting something that says Free Diversity Library on it, or maybe also putting our Girl Scout number troop on it.
We also would plan to maybe put a little description inside of what type of books we're planning to have inside the libraries.
So I also think this sounds really, I turned myself off. Ha ha ha. I think, I'm very impressed by what you've described. This is just an additional idea, but it'd be neat to advertise it at the Albany Library so that if people are looking for specific books, they can find it. But I think this is a brilliant idea.
Thanks.
I had another question. Have you talked to As You Wish about their assistance with, or just how much they're willing to have the structure in front of their parklet?
We haven't, when we talked to Shelley today, she told us that As You Wish and the coffee place next door, they have to help sustain that area of the parklet. So we understand if that's too hard to put a library there.
But if they wanted to build another one after, then we can talk to the owners and see how they feel. Yeah.
So I have a question about the color. I saw that the prototype you had was blue and yellow, and I remember the loop, when it was first proposed, was yellow, very bright yellow. And so I was wondering if your colors that you chose, blue and yellow, are to match the loop, and if As You Wish, if you're going to choose colors that match the planters that are out front in the parklet.
We haven't really chosen colors yet. The picture we showed you was just an example that we found in Albany, but we're just gonna think about colors that go well with the color of the loop or whatever we'll put them in front of.
The plan sounds great in a lot of ways to me. For colors, I think sometimes contrast helps it jump out and get people's attention, so it doesn't, I wouldn't think it would necessarily have to blend in with the color scheme that's already there.
Questions?
I just wanted to comment, thank you so much for all of your efforts in this. I think it's such an important project, and I'm glad that you're interested.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, so now we're going to have a discussion. So I think you all can take a seat now because we'll just have that discussion amongst the commission.
You can have the public comment.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So any members of the public that want to make comment? So if you please approach. We prefer you to come so we already have them recorded.
Hi there. Do I have to say mine? I'm Leslie Alperin. It sounded like it was geared not only towards diversity, but kids maybe under 18. Am I correct in assuming that?
We're trying to make it for people like in their really early stages of life and also adults.
Oh, adults as well. Okay, I just thought there might be a way to distinguish it, the audience that you're trying to target beyond just saying diversity. And then the other thing I was going to suggest is I think it's always good to, I don't know if you've ever been waiting for a bus or whatever, but it's good to have something like that maybe where people are standing around anyway, because if you put it in a location where people are riding bikes by it or going quickly by it, they might not notice it as much as if it was somewhere where there was a bench or something where people would have to take the time to wait for something and then they would notice it and maybe access it more. Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Anybody else want to approach for public comment? Okay, so now we'll have a discussion. Anybody have any comments?
Just a different point of view maybe from the last bit of your comment, which is that I walk around a lot and often past little free libraries, and I find it's sort of interesting to stop and look at them. So even though I'm maybe walking for fitness or something, I still enjoy kind of passing them and noticing it. So I think you do make a good point that if people are already standing there, you might have a captive audience, but I think it might be interesting because there's a lot of traffic on that part of the Greenway.
Is this, I mean, it sounds like, maybe this is more of a question, but Shelley can just address it to you. It sounds like the Loney or this loop is the first choice. Is that right?
Yeah, I think they were interested in both locations, but we hadn't spoken to the owners of As You Wish, which we can totally do. And it was also driven by the number of libraries that they were interested in making. So they could start with this one, and if it turns out to be a success, we could add to the other location. Because as you know, the parklet is a bus stop, so it kind of gets both of them.
I think it'd be a great place for traffic.
They got interested in this spot because if you'll remember, the loop is not only that art piece that's kind of graphic in nature, but it is also a place you sit and interact with. So we're thinking this is going to be a place where people sit, lean against it, might be reading a book, I think is their thought process.
One question I have is, as far as the maintenance goes, is for, I believe people also drop off books and exchange, and so I like the idea that there's all these other groups that are going to be helping out with replenishing it. That sounds like a great plan, and to get all those different groups involved. There may also need to be people that do some weeding. If there's some books that either aren't appropriate or who decides that would be another issue.
I thought you wanted to actually weed around the area first.
I mean, I think it's a good point that you raised, but I think the community oftentimes comes out and actually does that culling. I think that folks in Albany are all aware of what's appropriate and what's not, and with all the libraries that are out there, we don't really find inappropriate materials. So.
No, I think what Brian's saying about, Commissioner Martin's saying about if we were really specific to diversity, right? If there's just general books in there. But I think if there's a stewardship, then that would hopefully involve that kind of choice for the books. I would also say it's great with the Girl Scouts in Albany. I know my daughter's a Girl Scout, or was one recently, but she, that would be a great thing to hand down when you all eventually graduate. So, any other questions or comments?
I just think it's a wonderful idea, so thank you for bringing this forward, and I think it just makes the Ohlone and Albany even better than it already is, so thanks for your time and efforts.
Yeah, I would, the other comment I'd make is I see them probably in other areas or maybe Berkeley more often than Albany, so I think this is a great thing to promote too, because I think they're beautiful pieces. This is a beautiful idea anyway, and then to make it be about diversity, I think I really appreciate that too, so thank you all for your work on that.
Is it appropriate to make a motion? I'd like to move that we approve this project.
I'll second. So all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Okay, so next item, we're gonna, just so you all know, commissioners, even though on the agenda is two street tree removals. Do you want to speak to that, Shelley, or do you want me to, about the postponement until the next meeting?
Well, we just had a possible issue with not having that posted the entire time, so we want to make sure that we get that posted for the entire time, and sometimes we lose those postings, but we'll monitor it better, and so we're just going to kind of restart on the posting of those trees. And they're not an emergency, I'm sorry, I'm speaking for you. They're not an emergency situation, so we'll see them on the September agenda.
Great, thanks. So then the next item then would be item 6.1, gift to the city memorial tree and plaque application for Memorial Park.
That's Peggy.
We had a proposal to have a memorial tree installed in Memorial Park by our mayor. Should I, is it on there? It's on now. Shut it off? Okay. So I went out there with the mayor and we looked around and we decided, it's maybe a little bit hard to see, but the spot next to, sort of in the middle of the picture right there, would be a nice spot for the tree we decided on, which is a red maple. It grows into a large tree, beautiful fall color. There's some examples of what it looks like summer and fall. And it's deciduous, loses its leaves in the winter. Towards the top of the picture, there's another memorial tree that's a red oak. So we figured a little bit of diversity and kind of continue the mini forest around in that direction. Still leaves plenty of room for the field, the open grass for people to play, ball, run around, whatever. So.
You saw in the packet in the staff report that there's just a procedure we go through for, these are considered gifts to the city. And so the application was submitted. And in this capacity, she's a resident of Albany rather than the mayor. So a resident, Peggy McQuaid, submitted the application. It first went to the city manager, and then it comes to you, and then it would go to council for final approval. So.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Forgive me if this is inappropriate or beyond the scope of this, but it doesn't actually say what it's for. And is that something that would be shared, or typically when we have these kinds of applications, it's just that it's a memorial tree and then people can just use it to memorialize whatever they'd like? Or
True. It tends to be if, the passing of a person for the memorial tree. Peggy is here this evening. She can answer questions for you. This is for the passing of a relative. So I'll let Peggy take the podium on this one.
Thank you. It's an odd place to be right now. Yeah, it is for my daughter who passed away last year. And I just think this is an appropriate memorial for her. We spent a lot of time in the park. And as I said to John, I really liked how it lined up even with the pool, because we also spent far too much time at the pool. And there will be a plaque. I'm not 100% sure of the wording. I sent some text to Shelley today. Did you pass that on?
I did not pass it on, but if you'd like to share for...
It was something to the effect of Joanne Morse, your spirit will always be remembered, or something like that. I haven't totally worked it out yet, but I will, if necessary, get that to you at your September meeting. Okay.
Thanks, Mayor. Does anybody have any questions?
Will it be planted in the fall with the rains, or will it need?
Yeah.
And just a sapling that will then grow.
Yeah, typically a 15-gallon, I think we decided, or did we?
I think so.
24-inch. Typically, we plant 15 gallons, so they tend to take the best.
One question I had is, I know the park's called Memorial Park, and it sounds like your daughter spent a lot of time there. I know we just lost some trees in Terrace Park, and so would it be a possibility, or would it make sense to possibly put the tree there?
I would rather put it at Memorial Park. I did think about Terrace Park, mainly because we were really close to Jewel. But we spent a lot of time at Memorial Park, and that's what I'd like. But, of course, if it's the will of the commission, then we can make that adjustment if we have to.
If I could say one thing, although that's off the topic, I think we have some people that are interested in donating to plant trees back into Terrace, coming soon. To you.
I think it's a lovely memorial, and my condolences on your loss.
Thank you.
So anybody have any other questions? I think we can now accept other questions from the public or comments from the public, if any. Okay, so now discussion. I agree, thank you, Mayor, because I think I would love to see more trees in Memorial Park also, and that's a beautiful choice. And I don't know, would we really get that red? I'm wondering. I mean, it'd be either way. Okay. And I just personally think that location's great, well needed there, and yeah, really, it seems really appropriate.
Just the text of the plaque, it's not required on the application to provide what the text is going to be. I think we have a general idea of what it would be, and we can submit the exact text to go to council for their review when it goes to them, if you're comfortable with that.
I think that would be a good idea. In general, I think the city should know what's going to be on the plaque before the plaque gets put in a public park.
Of course.
My only other question for John is, will it be protected? Because the kids do, my kid included, climb on trees and.
Yeah, that's a good question. But we have the red oak that's there, and it has 2 wooden stakes in there, and it's been
all right.
holding up pretty well. Yeah, I don't think that specific area is too trampled. So it should be okay. If not, we replace it.
They run on the art piece, the kids.
This just raises for me, I don't know where it's listed. I'm aware of it from this commission that you can do a memorial tree, but I don't know if just generally the citizenry is aware of that, and it's such a lovely way to memorialize someone. I wonder if sometime in the Albany Guide or someplace like that, there might be a way to list it in a way that would let people just be aware of that as a possibility.
Yeah, particularly if, like we lost trees in Terrace Park and other places where trees have to be taken out. That could be a nice program, not just to necessarily fill Memorial Park with trees, but to meet the need of the city and to also help memorialize people who have passed.
Well, we lost that one large tree in Terrace, and whenever we lose a tree, we replace it. So it's just routine.
There were weren't there 3 other ones that fell?
3 trees in Oceanview. No, there was one that fell in Terrace, and there's 3 trees in Oceanview that are going to be removed, but they'll be replaced. But sure.
So I'd like to make, if we're done, I'd like to make a motion to accept this application.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, unanimous? Okay. So next item is Albany, let's see, sorry. 6.2, Albany Hill Access Improvements Update by Robert Gonzalez. City of Albany Capital Project Manager will present an update on the new ADA trail design details and potential tree removals.
Thank you. So a couple things have happened since, I'll make that a little larger. So I think we came to you last month. A couple things have happened since then, so I wanted to give you an update. The Monarch presentation was at the end of June, and then from there we made a little bit of a few design modifications, so I'll walk you through those, and we will talk about tree removal as part of those modifications. So Dr. Stuart Weiss is a butterfly expert, not just on monarchs. So he presented his presentation to us on the 27th. I want to say there were about 12 to 15 residents, 1 commission member, 3 to 4 staff. So it was well attended. It was at our Public Works Center. Following the presentation, Dr. Weiss walked a smaller group around the park to really look at where these trees are. So he had a lot of good, relevant information in the presentation. I'm not an expert. I'm not an entomologist. I'm not going to try to do that, but you can certainly read the report. This is map number 1, and it really gives you a lot of good information about the results of his study. So the 2 main takeaways are that his process is really to look at some really important factors of what makes good habitat for monarchs. They look for a specific temperature range, they look for wind protection, and they look for a certain amount of sunlight. And depending on what time of year it is, whether they're moving around a lot or they're looking at a place to, I guess, sequester for the winter, they're going to be moving around looking for certain things in that temperature range. So what Dr. Weiss did, among other things, is he took photographs in each of these white spots in 2017, and he's got some really good software that runs those 3 variables based on the photograph and the variables he's looking at to identify which trees look like prime habitat. So from the photograph, or from this aerial, all of those white dots are places that he looked at for essentially analyzing for habitat characteristics. And the 2 yellow circles are areas that he found that are distinct current habitat for monarchs. So the area at the top of the ridgetop cluster, the yellow areas are called clusters. And there are cluster trees in each of those. If I expand this a little bit more, you'll be able to see that some of these have a little yellow X in them. So this tree here, there's 4 trees in this yellow circle that have clusters, and then several downslope from there on the western slope that also are cluster trees. So the last time I reported, we were looking at improvements to the site that were essentially outside the realm of those trees. So the improvements that we're proposing are a Madison Street entrance, Taft Street entrance, Jackson Street entrance, and the Taft Steps. So those areas border but don't really encroach into the monarch habitat. When we did the site walk, there were a couple other trees that were just at the summit that looked like they were potential impacts. So that's some of the changes we're going to go through. So this is the Taft Turnaround. We did a little bit of cleanup on this detail. Not a lot changed. The ADA access was already there. The ADA parking was already there. We added bike racks. Sorry about that. We added bike racks here. So we have a bike rack on the north side, and then we have another bike rack here on the south side. This is the new ADA sidewalk, and this is the entrance to the ADA path. I think last time we reported that we were looking at about 6 or 7 trees that would be removed in this area. So I took a photograph here. This is the entrance. So this gate is going to be moved backwards, and the sidewalk is going to be placed here. This little area of earth is kind of a remnant of when they installed the fire road. So you can see that it was kind of placed there, but not really excavated before. So we're proposing to actually level that out and just remove that, so that essentially this is kind of a more naturalized slope, just moving down the hill. So these trees will in this area will be removed, as well as these stumps. This will provide an area that can be revegetated, whether that's with native plants or with native trees. If we can, certainly John will be involved in that design. But that's what we're looking at for this entry area. It'll be a much more inviting area for people to enter into the park. And then the ADA ramp is really going to be beginning right over here and then following this ridge up to the top. I shouldn't say ridge, this contour line. This is a detail of the summit area. The last time we presented this, the summit was going to be in this area over here. This circle was going to be clustered among these trees, and we were actually really putting kind of the trees in jeopardy. We were putting the circle very close to those trees. At the time, we thought that was really kind of an acceptable impact. But after the walk and after talking to the residents and after talking to Stu, the butterflies do like one or more of those trees. We're not sure which one. We want to protect all of them. So we simply talked to RDG, our design consultant. It's more important for us to keep those trees and to simply move the circle a little bit further out. So you're about a foot away from the true summit, but you're going to get that same summit experience, and you're just going to be beyond those trees just a little bit. The last time we talked, we had an ADA. We called it a spur. It went out here and then kind of circled back around. With the new alignments, this is no longer going to be an ADA compliant path. It'll be out of compliance because of slope. We'll still put it in there. We'll still grade it so people can use it. But it was kind of a trade-off to make sure that we could save those trees and move the circle a little bit further out. I'm not sure if the slope is falling down too fast or rising too fast, but it was just, the math just wasn't working out. We would have to do more grading to make that an ADA compliant slope path. The area up to the summit, including the circle, is going to remain ADA compliant. This is the Jackson Street entrance. A lot of this work is already shown, so there's not a lot of changes here, but we did add the bike racks here. And the dotted line is essentially is useful for the contractor to define their limits of work, so they know they're not going to go beyond those boundaries. They're not going to impact other habitat. If we want them to go beyond that, we'll explicitly expand that boundary. If we want them to do any sort of special plantings or anything like that, or remove something. And this is the Madison Street entrance. I think we talked about a lot of the features here before, including the striping, the entryway. We're going to take out that railing. We put in a placeholder for a bike rack here. We're not exactly sure where it's going to go, but we added a placeholder just so we had something to remind us that we want to include that bike rack in here. We put in this rail fence to kind of give this a nice strong border so we don't see people needing to go down that slope. That's a kind of a dangerous slope. And that's really, those are the kind of the big changes that we made since our last meeting. This isn't going to be the last time you see this. We're going to have a final review by Parks and Rec Commission in September. There'll be more details. We'll have to flesh out construction restrictions based on bird habitat and nesting. And then we'll do a final approval for bids by council in the fall. RDG has done a lot of these projects in the past. We've asked them specifically for construction groups or construction teams that they like to work with, that they've had success with. So we're looking at kind of building up a team, a good list of contractors that we could work with. And then we'll be looking at contracting it in the fall. These are the kind of the key questions that were discussed at the last meeting. I just put this up here as a reminder. We talked about bike racks. We made a little bit of change to the trail alignment, which we discussed tonight. We discussed a little bit of the tree removal. The way I was framing it for residents, and I probably framed it for you guys in the last meeting, is I see the tree removals falling into three categories. One category are those trees that are specifically in the path of the ADA ramp. So 6 to 7 of those trees, many of them right at the beginning of the pathway. The second group of trees would be trees that Dr. Weiss would recommend if we did remove them, we could encourage habitat for additional monarch benefits. So those are trees that Dr. Weiss, based on the photos that he's taken, would say in his estimation might improve habitat. So we've got potential habitat probably on the northern portion of the property that's still on city property. And the third area is really removal of fuel. That's things that is consistent with the 2012 management plan, and that would be supportive of the fire department's efforts of simply removing fuel from the property. Those are really things that we haven't fleshed out yet, so we don't have a list of trees for removal of those sorts, but the feedback we're getting from the fire department is really just focusing on trees that are dead or dying, that aren't. They may be providing habitat for a small number of birds, but that can be mitigated. These are trees that really just more provide a risk to the overall forest than a benefit. Work restrictions, I mentioned, a lot of that is about bird habitat and bird nesting. And the big bellies at Taft and Madison, I haven't forgotten about those. They didn't make it into this set of drawings, but that's on our radar to make sure that those go in.
Thank you.
That's it. That's what I have.
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners?
I always have questions. First, thank you for making some monarch considerations. I guess something that came up last time with the overlook, kind of that turnaround, was the potential to maybe remove some trees to have a better view. Does the realignment of it obviate those issues, or is that something that might still be considered?
It's still a possibility. The challenge with that situation is that all of the trees that would benefit views, if you're opening it up to see Mount Tam or the Golden Gate, you could identify the trees that are in the way, and all of those trees are off of city property. So we would have to reach out to the property owner and enter into some sort of agreement. So that's kind of a step out of bounds of the project. We'd be open to hearing from the commissioners about that. If that's something you want us to explore, we can certainly start having those conversations. Right now, the plans don't include those, but we cannot easily identify those trees. Now it's a matter of policy whether we want to reach out, and maybe it's a cost share, maybe it's something else, but it needs to be an agreement with the property owner.
I would agree. I think that's a good avenue to explore to improve the public's enjoyment of the park, even with looking at birds in the mud flats and the vistas of the bay. I've expressed interest in having some strategic trees removed, so I would encourage the city to make those steps to talk to the property owner.
So we're still doing questions right now. Does anybody have any other questions? And then we'll take public comment.
I do. So in the report that Creekside Science provided, they talked about invasive species management and specifically highlighted acacia. Are there acacia in the project area, and will they be removed during this phase, the kind of building phase, to help follow their recommendations?
I don't know for certain if any of those are acacia. I can find out.
Okay. Any other questions?
The boundary you showed around the Taft steps, was that more to make sure the environment doesn't get impacted beyond that, or does that reflect the survey you said before you were hoping to have done soon?
The Taft steps does not reflect the survey yet. I'm still waiting for the title reports for that. So that's a boundary of work to protect habitat that we know just outside of that area is some native plants. So I had them add that in there just to protect the native plant habitat.
And would there be some signage to indicate on the ADA path that it's not ADA anymore? How does that work for somebody that might get into something they can't handle?
That's a good question. I'll work with RDG to make that distinction. Maybe we'll have a path at the Y to show that the circle is ADA compliant, and then maybe we name the path something else to make it clear that it's not the same path. Hadn't thought of that one.
Any other questions? Okay. So we'll open up to the public comment. If anybody has a comment, they can approach. Thanks. If you could please say your name.
this in the right position. Hi, good evening. I'm Carol Fitzgerald, and I live on Madison and Solano, and I'm a longtime member of the Friends of Albany Hill. I did attend both the site visit and the meeting at Public Works, and actually I would say more than 12, but you know, people in my position like to have a higher number. And it was wonderful. It was actually one couple that was there and lived in Albany for 25 years, and they'd never been to Albany Hill. And so that was really nice to welcome them up there. I want to just say a few things about the acacia. There is an acacia down on the west slope, and Stu specifically said don't remove it because the monarch, sometimes when the wind blows or the rain's heavy, they fall down and they don't have enough energy to come up from the ground, so they need this catch. It's like their safety net. So I don't know about other acacias, but I know the one that he mentioned that he wouldn't want removed. But it's also on private open space. I think the hill is inviting as it is, and it will be inviting with what's going to happen to it also, but it isn't like, it's not quite special. In fact, we call it the Urban Nature Preserve, which was mentioned and written up in the Ornithology magazine in the 90s by Dr. Dick Beidelman. And actually, a few of us approached the council about changing that category from a park to an urban nature preserve, keeping in line of what Friends of Albany Hill, longtime organization, has been interested in. Of course, the advice is not to do it now because the courts might think they're playing around because of the lawsuit, that we might be trying to rename it to get out of something. So we will still call it that, but it won't be official. I want you all to think a lot about trees, the removal of trees, and particularly eucalyptus. It's not just as easy as you think. In 1995 and 1996, I applied on behalf of our group in the city and won 2 urban forestry grants 2 years in a row and managed those. And we had first of all eucalyptus taken out of directly behind the Jackson condos, and that one was taken out with using a cherry pick and everything because they didn't want to damage the oaks. But the next year we had 18 taken out from the northwest corner that were invading the oak woodland. So, is that it?
Can we give you another minute?
It'd be great if you could. So, each tree was like 4 main trees because they had been cut and then the shoots had grown up. So it was a massive operation. And at that time, the arborist did use Garlon to treat them. I'm not sure if he used it fast enough or if it's just not the perfect answer, but we did have to have Shelter Belt come back 2 years in a row and trim some of the shoots that keep coming up. So it's not just that you walk away, that you do a step. You cut it down and you walk away. And then the other challenge was the amount of foliage that came down. And we worked with Mark Ginn, who was the fire chief. And of course, we had this window of time. You couldn't cut them down when the birds were nesting. But then we had to get all of that debris out of there before the fire season. So it's a really big thing. So I would really caution about just taking trees down for views, and if the 11 acres gets developed, we are going to have more views than we ever wanted of the marine. So let's keep that little 100-foot from each side of the ridge is really all we own at the very top. So it's really great for our birds and our monarchs and the other activities that we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Public comments? Okay, we can, oh, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Okay, how is this? Yeah, my name is Ralph Pericoli, and I speak in favor of the birds. Okay, what we have here on Albany Hill is an ecological treasure in the middle of a vast urban sprawled area. Okay, it's very important for resident birds, migrating birds, wintering birds, and vagrant birds that stop here. We now have a species list of over 100, about 103 to be exact, that use that hill, so it's very important, okay? And what is important up there are the trees, and so speaking for the birds, I would oppose any removal of trees there, which provide, valuable nesting habitat, perching habitat, feeding habitat, and also the dead snags too. Very valuable in terms of cavity nesters and whatnot. And I guess I had a question as to, maybe for Robert, as to what mitigation would be done with the removal of dead trees and snags that you had mentioned. So very valuable area, and I'd like to see it preserved. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, we can bring it back to the commission. I do have a question. I appreciate the comments that were just related to that. It's just, it sounds like the plan for the tree removal is not totally defined, right? It's not like the proposed trees have been picked out and that there's a criteria, but it's not like it's all been set, or am I mistaken there?
So the alignment is still preliminary, but with the current alignment, we have identified the 6 or 7 trees that would be removed based on that. The other tree categories, you're correct, those have not been specifically identified. So we're looking at this point, a minimum of 6 or 7 trees based on the alignment that we've chosen. To keep those trees, we would end up changing the design. Well, so the criteria, if we change the criteria to remain ADA compliant and protect all of those trees, we would be looking at significantly additional grading to keep the trees, but then we would have to cut into the hill further to get the fire road closer to compliance, because we would have to move the trail essentially upslope from all of those trees. So we couldn't weave in and out and maintain ADA compliance because of the slope changes. I have the path needs to reach 400 feet of run and hit about 5 or 6 feet of elevation increase. So to do that in compliance with a 4.75%, 5% maximum slope, you need a lot of that space to get through there. So if I'm weaving in and out of the trees, I never make it to the the path never makes it to the summit. So there are other difficult choices that we would have to make and make further changes to the hill, so it would look substantially different. If we were to keep all of those trees, we'd end up moving under the fire more quickly and basically cutting off the top of that hill by some amount. I'd have to calculate.
You're talking about the 6 or 7, that's the minimum, right? You're not talking about the additional, okay.
Correct.
Is it possible when you come back in September that you could have identified those additional categories? Because to me, the 6 or 7 that have been, vetted by the Monarch specialist and are many of them near the entrance, those aren't concerning to me in the same way. And I'm actually someone that's it's of interest to me to have some opportunity for a view, having just recently been up there, and those moments where you have a peek between, it's very lovely. At the same time, I can certainly understand a kind of bottomless categories of, it's hard to know what number are for, and I'm also supportive of fuel removal, but I don't know how many trees that means. And I think that might be kind of helpful for people to have a little more specific ranges around those other 2 categories, so that we understand kind of for this project to go forward in its fullest and best way, what are we looking at in terms of those kinds of changes?
Yes.
A question I have, I guess maybe it's also a little bit about how the commission runs, because I'm new, but can we recommend that plants, if trees are removed and native vegetation is planted underneath, that A, native vegetation be prioritized, and B, plants that provide resources for birds or monarchs are selected to plant? Because I know, for example, the Xerces Society has a whole list of plants that monarchs prefer to go to, and a lot of them provide, berries or other nectar resources that birds also prefer.
Yeah, I think you're free to recommend both of those as action steps, and we take those back to our design consultant.
Another question I had was the first speaker talked a little bit about how the stumps would be treated for the removed trees. It sounds like on the ADA path, some of those stumps might need to be grinded to grade, but if other trees are removed, will you specify how those will be treated? Will it be painted and then?
We haven't narrowed into an exact treatment. We're looking at our options right now. Again, RDG has done these types of removal projects before and restoration, so we want some options from their perspective about what's non-toxic, what's effective, what's cost-effective, and then look at all of those options. What's long-range effective? We don't want shoots coming back up and having to enter into this and continue maintenance of these types of efforts. We wanted something that's long-term effective.
So then, once you get the recommendations, will that be part of the bid packet to the contractor specifying, we want you to use this?
Correct. Along with the drawings, we'll have a written specification for each of the performance criteria we have, whether that's how to remove the trees or what type of materials that are going to be allowed to go into the other pathways. Like the pathways between Jackson and Taft and Madison are very narrow, so we'll probably end up having to restrict the amount and type of equipment that goes in there. So all of those restrictions are to be developed in the specifications.
I want to say the design's looking great. Thanks for adding the bike racks. And is there something the commission should do to formally request that the city approach the landowner about potential tree removal?
I don't think so. I'm still new to the city, so I don't
think
know.
a question for Shelley, maybe.
Maybe.
Sorry, but are you asking because you're recommending for the view? Sorry, just curious what the question.
He said, well, we could approach the landowner if we were given direction, something like that, I think he said, to begin conversations about how that would work. And so is that something that we could or should do now?
I think that the item, because the item said give feedback to staff, I believe your feedback will go to Robert, and then he will move from there. That is a...
I would just say, and maybe you have already talked about this, and I'm sure that the designers have been thinking about the trees, but I empathize about the reason that it's beautiful is because of the trees, and I'm not saying that I don't know what the impact of the 6 or 7 will be. A lot of that depends on the height and the canopy, et cetera. So I would just say, it's kind of ironic that we have to cut down beautiful trees to have access to be in an environment that we appreciate because of the trees. So, I don't know to the extent that your designer has been very, very thoughtful about any way to mitigate. It's just a thought I wanted to put out there because we're trusting that they've thought of every solution, and I just would like to sort of pause on that and ask them to think as hard as they can to really minimize that, because that's why we love Albany Hill. So, one of the reasons.
We'll definitely take that back to RDG for consideration. Some of Ralph's question was also related to mitigations specifically. There's nothing stopping us from replanting trees of a specific type or whatever vegetation we find amenable to the park as a whole. One of the values of the park for all of those different types of birds is the simple volume and size of the park. That's a value in itself because it gives a lot of, the size of the habitat increases its value for all birds, not just for all the birds that Ralph mentioned. So just having all of that mass of trees is very beneficial. So we don't want to lose any of that. So I appreciate the comment back.
And I just wanted to make one other comment, which is I think there's always a tension between sort of these improvements and keeping everything the way that it is. But as somebody that only recently hiked up there myself for the first time, and I went on all the trails, and some of them are quite steep, and the footing's not that great. And I also have a father-in-law who's in a wheelchair, and I'm a mother who is perfectly fine walking around, but is not going to hike up some of the things that I hiked up. And I just am sensitive to the fact that I've lived here for 10 years. I'm an outdoors person. I enjoy going and being outdoors, and I haven't been there. And I think there are other people like that that can't enjoy the park or don't enjoy the park as fully. So finding some compromise and some happy medium that does retain the native habitat for these beautiful animals and create a space that's natural and that feels like you're in nature, but also has some accessibility, to me feels like a good way to invite more of our community into this beautiful place. So I agree with all of the comments, public and from the commissioners, about being as thoughtful as we can about retaining trees. And I also want to think with a future vision about how this space would enhance our community if more people were able to enjoy what it is that's making it so special. So I think that's, accessibility is always a complicated thing because there are a lot of very specific codes about how to do that, but they're there for a reason, and we have a lot of people in this community that may be better able to enjoy the park with these adjustments.
I also wanted to just reiterate and reinforce the comments that Commissioner Sardinius made about planting the native or just any other kinds of plants that would enhance the monarch environment, or anyway. So I'm just thinking if there's a way to re-engage that monarch specialist, I don't know what he's called, at some...
Dr. Stu Weissman. Yeah, he's really awesome.
Yeah, I just think thank you so much for bringing him out and having him look at that in a thoughtful way. And I just think no harm to also bring him in again at a different time when the plantings are going to happen, before the plantings happen, to make recommendations also.
So I said, there are monarch plant lists that are developed that you could also draw from, or we could.
That credit goes to Friends of Albany Hill. They knew about Dr. Weiss before we did. And we have him on retainer, so he's looking at the drawings now, and we can have him recommend something off of those plant lists.
Great.
Thank you.
Another question I had, in case any, for the fuel reduction, any snags or trees that are not alive come down, might be to think about putting up bird boxes or something to try and replace some of those cavities if indeed it's recommended that they're lost.
Yeah, we'll rely on RDG for some of that expertise, but yes, that's on our list of mitigations.
And I think those comments were made at the last meeting also about the bird boxes, because it was new for me.
Yeah, Mr. Piccoli specifically mentioned those.
I wanted to go back to your criteria for tree removal. Mm-hmm. So if trees have to come down for the ADA path, I think that's important. Your point about making the park accessible, I think, is really important. For taking down trees for the monarch butterflies, I agree that the monarch specialist will tell us if it makes sense to take trees down if it's going to improve habitat, but otherwise, I didn't hear anything about the views being one of the criteria, improved views being a criteria for taking down trees, and so I would not be in support of that. The 2012 the management plan.
Master plan.
So I remember when we worked on that there was an analysis of the eucalyptus that were up on the hill, and there were more trees identified that there were issues with those trees having to come down because maybe they weren't healthy or they were identified as a hazard. And we didn't have the resources to take those trees down. And so if trees need to come down, I would be in favor of looking at safety as an issue instead of views as an issue. I live on Madison, and I spend a lot of time up on the hill, and it's true you don't have, fabulous views up on the summit, but I think that the trees provide a great environment, and I think that it would be unfortunate if we removed trees for views and prioritize that over removing trees for safety.
I agree with that too, and I think that it's just one of those. These trees are, I don't know how many years old, but the height and the canopy is just, you just can't just replace with another tree, and is not the same. It takes 50 years to actually replace. So I agree. I think we should be really thoughtful when it comes to something that's a more subjective criteria. Well, not everything is a subjective criteria, but something like views, which some people may enjoy and some people may not. They may want just the canopy environment rather than the view when they're in that space, so.
I think three of us have said would be in favor of removing trees for views, and I would certainly want that to be done, if it's done, in a very strategic way. Yeah.
And then by safety, do you mean fuels reduction as part of safety, or what are you?
It was that, but it was also the stability of the trees, the age of the trees, like the orientation of the trees, like some of them are leaning. So yeah. There were many. I don't remember. It was 5 years ago, but that analysis was part of the 2012 plan.
But something like having this criteria involve the views, that's not something we've decided on necessarily, right? I just want to be clear about your point, that was never, from your long history on the commission, we never, as a commission, said, yes, we're going to approve of tree removal for the views. I just want to be clarify that. Shelley, would you remember?
Well, I mean, there could be some of these hazardous trees that are not on city property. So I think having that discussion with those property owners about trees, whether it's views or because of hazardous trees, probably should be the discussion, that one and the same, I would think.
At some point. Yeah. Okay, so maybe that's another agenda item for a future meeting. I mean, I don't know if it's now.
Well, I don't think it needs to be now. We might not have all the information that we want for that discussion.
Okay.
We can certainly come back into September. We're fleshing out the final elements of this design. So tree removal, if we want to keep it in this, if we want to have it as part of this contract, then we're going to cross that bridge in September.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look at the master plan to see what, if anything, was discussed about views.
Okay, thank you.
But if you could bring back options where we could, with hopefully the full commission would be here, and we could, have, take action on those options, like that would be preferable to me.
So this item was really just a feedback request. So I don't think we need to vote on anything necessarily, right, Shelley? Okay. So does anybody else have any comments on the commission? Okay, thank you very much. And so the next item is the Dog Park Subcommittee report, and members of the subcommittee will report back to the commission. So I'm actually the only member of the Dog Park Subcommittee that's here tonight, so I guess it's me. And just a reminder that I'm part of the commission, obviously, and Commissioner Abbott and Commissioner Romero. And just to update the commission and the public, we've met once with Shelley, and Shelley gave a really helpful summary of the history of dogs in Albany, also Section B. And so from there, we kind of started brainstorming strategies for public outreach and how to really engage those that are most affected, most interested. And so what we thought was that it would make sense to have different types of outreach, one being just a general public survey that we figure out how to really get participation in, but general public survey for both dog users or just park users. But then also a more targeted, in-depth conversation that we want to start with those right around Section B, because they are the most affected by dogs in Albany. And so just to really reach out and hear their concerns. And so that's where we got to at the end of that first meeting. And I think that was actually really good progress. So then commissioners, the subcommittee commissioners, without Shelley, because it was on the weekend, we met to sort of finalize or flesh out that first strategy. And what we decided was, I think we had already decided that we are, as the three commissioners, and actually with the help of Commissioner Martin, since he's also the alternative on the commission, is to reach out to the neighbors of Section B and really just knock on doors and actually ask them if we can talk, if they have time, and or just leave our information to say, please approach us or call us if you'd like to talk further, so we can really hear what their concerns are. And I think no matter what, even if they're supportive or not, it would be helpful to hear what their experience has been with dogs in Albany. So that's where we got, and I think our next step is to actually do that outreach. So we're going to hopefully finish that within the next month, and then I think we'll be able to report something back to you by September, which is the next meeting. And we are going to have public comment. So, but does anybody have any questions before we take public comment on the commission?
I don't recall if last time we discussed this, there was some question about statistics from either the police department or about issues that had escalated in the various dog park areas, to just give us a little more data about that. Will that be something that either the subcommittee gets access to?
Actually already prepared that, so she was, that was great. You already, that's something we can report back when we provide the summary in September. I think that makes the more sense, especially when the other commissioners are here who participated.
Yes, and there was so I have it's call logs for section B, but then we'll expand that to just general dog calls if we can. They only search for a specific site, but not all dog related, because it could be anything like a noise at a private resident, so it takes a little more investigation. But we do have about 3-4 years of logs.
One question I had was, you mentioned section B, and I think it's really important to consider section B as a fleshed out dog park. Were other sites discussed at the subcommittee meeting?
Oh, the other thing we're doing is we're considering all different sites in Albany. And so Shelley gave us a list of some of the potential areas. And so we've all done a reconnaissance of those areas. And I think when we do our general survey to the general public, because there's one is just to talk about those concerns of that area, but also just generally what the public might want. And so that's going to be, I think we'll be able to touch on that when we ask more questions in a more public survey, very general, about where you'd like to see a dog park and what would be most helpful to you. So we're going to craft our questions to be able to ascertain if some of those parks are good sites or not.
So will you, when you provide the summary in September, list out the tasks and the timelines associated with those, so that we have a clear
Sure.
picture?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think the approach basically at that point was just collecting information, either data or interviews and surveys to see where people are.
Any other questions? Okay, so if anybody would like to make public comment, you can, okay. Go ahead. Oh, sure, sorry, she approached first, maybe you can be next, is that okay? Sorry. Yeah. Oh, I'm confused, I'm sorry, I was pointing to you. Go ahead, and then she'll come next. Sorry about that, I apologize.
3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Sue Douglas. I live on 925 Talbot, and I have a golden retriever, and everybody in the neighborhood knows her. I'm very interested in the issue of the dog park. I know that there's been a lot of complaints in the past from the neighbors. I think the city has done a lot to make it, the dog park doesn't open until 11 in the morning, and it closes it by 8 at night. And I think, that's a lot of accommodation for people. Most of it's during working hours, so presumably not that many people would be home. I know there have been some very vocal people in the past. My concern, last year, I think it was, they talked about using the garden at Oceanview and replacing the dog park, which just would have never worked because it was way too small. And the other thing I'm concerned about is nobody has ever put a big belly over there. They seem to want to get along without it. The trash has been upgraded to a little better container, but they went and poured a whole platform there, and I thought we were getting a big belly, and it gets pretty smelly, which is not something that people who have questions about the dog park, that's a negative. So that's primarily what I say. I look forward to getting a survey from you all for the dog park users, and hope you put it up there in envelopes so that when we're there, we'll use it.
Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion.
That's it.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, please. Thanks.
I'm Christine Lucas, and I'm a resident of Albany and a caregiver of a dog, and a very small dog. And she is actually pretty lucky to be alive. She was bit by a very large dog in a park and almost died. And so anyway, so I'm here because I would like to request that a small dog park be included in these plans, whether it's next to the large dog park or in a separate area. It's just, the safety of the dogs is what I would be concerned with large dogs and small dogs playing together. I think most cities have separate dog parks, depending on the size. So that's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lydia Raya, and I'm also a resident here in Albany. I have 2 small dogs, one 10 pounds and one 14 pounds. And so like Christine, I would love to see a small dog park here. I've taken my dogs to the park that is here in Albany, but my dogs are afraid when the big dogs play together. They don't want to play with them. And I've also taken my dogs to the park on Hearst, I think the Ohlone Dog Park, and my dog, the 10-pound dog, went out and was very excited to be there and got completely knocked over and pummeled by a dog who was just trying to play with him. So, they can be injured whether or not a dog is aggressive. A dog can be perfectly friendly, but when you're 10 pounds versus 50 pounds, you kind of have no chance. So he was very spooked, and he was okay, but we basically had to leave after that. So I would love if my own city, had something like this. We would definitely utilize. And when we take our dogs for walks every day, I think a lot of people in this area have small dogs because we all have small houses, most of us. So I think it would be a great benefit for a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Leslie Alperin. I actually live in Berkeley, right off Portland, so I'm nearby. But I wanted to say a few things. When you do your survey, I understand the concerns of the neighbors, especially with noise, and I hope it will include the actual dog users in the neighborhood, because there's several people, a lot of elderly people, young people, people with kids, who all walk to the dog park. And there was some discussion at the dog park about moving it over near Oceanview, but it's not as accessible. You have to drive there, and there's just more traffic and danger in terms of people with dogs and managing their dogs and things like that. Sort of given the other discussion of Albany Hill and the trees, I noticed the other day that there's, it's a cyclone fence that surrounds the existing dog park, and there's a kind of another fence. I think it goes onto a soccer field or the field next door where kids play. And I was just wondering if there could be some sort of sound barrier put in that area where it's kind of a mesh where you can't see through, is a possibility, or something more beautiful like trees and vines or something like that, just to sort of act as a sound buffer so that the neighbors that are having the issues with barking, which seems to me pretty minimal overall, and as well as other dog park users. We've had those discussions about dogs barking, and people are very cognizant about stopping a dog if it is barking. But if there was some beautification kind of project around the fencing, it could possibly buffer some of the sound and be a sort of a quicker fix than actually moving the whole dog park. And I also understand the people with small dogs, I have small dogs too that I leave at home. I don't bring there, I bring my big dog, because small dogs get kind of knocked over. And Ohlone does have a small dog park, and it's nice to have the separation. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, so I'm also an Albany resident. I have a dog, and I guess, so one thing I'm concerned about is the data collection methods. So I know a lot of people use the park. People can drive to the park from El Cerrito. I guess I'm just concerned if it's a sort of a localized survey or something like that, you'd be missing out on a lot of, I think that if we have clear data, it'll be sort of, the number of people who benefit from the park is, I go to the park every day. I mean, there's hundreds of people who use that park, if not more. So, the concerns of people nearby are valid, but, it really just seems sort of unreasonable when you compare to, say, like, the kids' park, right? It's like, we pay, I don't have kids, I have a dog, right? And it's like, that park isn't closed until 11 a.m., right? It's just, some of the things just really don't seem fair at all. Like, the park, it doesn't have a double entrance so dogs can escape easily. It hardly looks like a dog park. It looks like it's a patch of grass. And it's like, it really bothers me that I feel like it's second-class citizens, sort of. It's like we're, and then the whole Oceanview thing, like trying to, that really sort of bothered me. It's like, it would just diminish the value of the dog park so much for so many people, for like, a couple people who are really, complaining. And it's like, of course, I do acknowledge that, their complaints are important, but it's like you have like, people doing construction at 8 a.m., right? And it's like jackhammers and stuff, and the dogs can't, we can't even, like the 11 a.m. thing to me is like the most egregious, sort of like unreasonable policy, because people have to go to work. It's like, what the hell are you supposed to do? And it's like, then you're gonna have dogs who are, pent up, like with all this energy because they can't go to the dog park, so they're barking throughout the day. It really seems to serve everyone to have like a fair outlet for people to take their dogs at like any given hour. Like I used to live in New York City. They open at like 6 a.m. to like 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. at night, and it's like, and they're like every 3 or 4 blocks in Manhattan. It was crazy. It's like you would think that that'd be a terrible place for dogs, but they took it seriously. They acknowledged that like, there's a lot of people. These are their kids, right? And they spend thousands of, whatever. They should have sort of equal facilities to people who have kids. So it's like, anyways, thanks.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, I just want to make sure there's not others that want to comment or. Yeah, no, I'll let you go. I just want to make sure others who haven't said anything, who want to make comment. Anybody else want to make comment who hasn't yet? Okay, go ahead.
I'll try to keep my comments within bounds. I perhaps should just address this to Nick Pilch, but I happened to be here at the council meeting when he unveiled his plan for water bottle stations. And to me, they made no sense. Why 2 at Terrace Park and none in Memorial Park and none at the dog park at all? There's one like 3 or 4 blocks away that has a dog fountain. Right now, there are no amenities whatsoever. No benches, no water source. It's just a fenced-in green area. They took out the one shade tree like 2 or 3 years ago. And I would like to, I don't know how much influence you guys have with Nick Pilch or the city council, but I'd like to recommend that they reconsider where they're putting those and put one that's reasonably close to the dog park and have it be a fountain. There's one on the Greenway that's a ways away, but it's not something the dog can reach when they're in the park, and that they consider putting one of those that's a double so that there's a fountain for the people and a fountain down low for the dogs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mm-hmm.
I know, it's Leslie Alpern again. I know the dog park has a fence. You push a button, and then it makes a noise and lets you in. Is there a way to use that as a counter to somehow count the activity going in and out of the dog park? Because if there's some way to do that, then you can monitor what the use is. Imagine, every time it opens, that's one person at least, not more. And also the water. Everybody has to bring water in for the dogs. So that would be a great thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? You want to say it one more time?
About the water thing, there's potentially a really easy solution. So on the other side of the fence where that garden is, there is a underground sort of water spigot thing. And actually, at one time, somebody brought a hose and plugged it in there with like a second attachment, and was able to sort of they jury-rigged a water attachment into the dog park. And eventually, the hose broke, and so we took it all down. But there's already the infrastructure there to just have a little thing go right through the fence. So it's like, if you had a trough there, I mean, it would just be like, you could literally, in like a couple hours, two guys could throw something in, that'd be really great. So, thanks.
Thanks. I think this is a moment, just because you all are obviously dog owners and users of that area, just to give a little 3-minute little background. And Shelley, I think you may be the best person, or I can, but I learned a lot in our meeting with Shelley about the history, and there's a reason that those amenities aren't there. And so, and this the part of it. But anyway, so Shelley, if you want to talk, or if I can explain either way.
Yeah, that's totally fine. The reason why you don't have any amenities is because it's not an official dog park, and it has come before the council and Parks and Rec past commissions has been decided to not add amenities, to keep it Section B, and that's why it's called Section B. It was formed by when the fence went between the ball field and that area, and that created this space where we said it would be a multi-use space. So obviously dogs wanted to use it because it's a nice area, and you kind of contain your dog, and then it evolved from there. So that's the commission is really taking leadership in this moment to really address this and hopefully come to a final resolution on that space, or if it's going to be another space. So if you're experiencing frustration because you want it to be a dog park, an official dog park with all of the amenities that go with that, that's part of this process too, because you're frustrated. Or, if you're a neighbor and you're like, that shouldn't be a dog park, it should be someplace else, or maybe there's a better place, that's what this subcommittee is going to be looking at, and so that they can make a recommendation to council on what they feel is the best location, and if whatever location is chosen, amenities that might be provided in that.
And I think I just would encourage you to, just keep track of those notices that Shelley puts out whenever we're discussing this, because your voices do count. And so I think, that's what we're trying to do with this public process, to really get public input, and showing up at the meetings is one of the most powerful ways you can really make impact. So, but now you kind of know the history. And so we're going through this process in order to do it right. And even after we come up with a recommendation, it still has to be, it's just a recommendation to council, but they'll have all that data. They'll have, all the information that they probably will need to hopefully make that decision.
I think that, the frustration you experience is because when we created that space, we didn't really create it like we would create a normal park where there's a public process and we're going to make this and let's all talk about what we want to see in the space. It never really went through that. So, many years later after that, we're trying to address it. So we're going backwards.
Well, just to add to that history, Section B was diminishment of the existing facilities. Because previously, dogs could use the entire field.
Yeah.
Well, actually, sorry, this is usually we reserve public comment for that time. We just want to keep order with the meeting. So.
Right. This went before council. Dogs are not allowed in Section A, which is the ball field. Section B, dogs are allowed. Actually, Albany has a very liberal leash law. Dogs can be off leash, so actually your dog can run free in any of our parks off leash, except for in playground spaces where kids are. And then Section B came up, and it became this. People call it the de facto dog park. Is really what it is. So, but it hasn't been officially said that is the dog park in the city of Albany. If it goes to that, and that is the best recommendation for location, then so be it. If there is a better location in the city, then that would be the recommendation. So.
Yep, that's right.
Or multiple locations.
If we could make that work, right.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. The first is, since we've been hearing about this over the past several months, I've walked by Memorial Park in the Section B area at various hours of the day, various days of the week. I have never seen disruption in that area, which surprised me because some of the complaints that I had heard aired here were painting a different picture. So I was curious and maybe some of the data that you have will help me to have a better understanding. If those were anomalies, or if those were things from several years ago, or if those are still ongoing challenges at maybe perhaps times that I just don't happen to be going by. Because what I saw was a lot of people and dogs enjoying the park in a very healthy, good way. And if I were, so that was kind of one comment, was it was a different picture than what I had thought based on my previous sort of taking in of information. The second thing I just want to say, as a person that commutes into San Francisco, I don't have a dog, but if I did, it would be very limiting not to have those morning hours. And I completely understand the frustration and challenge around that. I also understand that there are people living nearby, but it does feel like those hours are exceedingly late to begin a park recreation space for walking your dog in the morning or taking your dog out. So if I could just ask the subcommittee, look at that as you're thinking about these recommendations. I think it's imperative that a dog park be available to people at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning. And I understand there may be zoning or codes, or it may just be out of courtesy for the people living nearby, but it seems to me that if you can't walk your dog or take your dog out before you head into the office, like, that's a problem.
So just a bit of history. So when those hours were, when the commission looked at those hours before, we had recommended to council that the dog park be open in the early morning and late in the afternoon. And council, took our recommendations and thought that a continuous block of time would be better. So they took the 8-hour stretch and they went from, or 10 hours, and they went from late in the morning to later in the evening, figuring that you would, I think that it was their decision, but it wasn't the recommendation that the commission had put forward.
And thank you for that. And the other thing I just wanted to make a comment about was small dog parks. I think I mentioned it either at the previous meeting or 2 meetings ago. I also used to live in New York City. There are so many small dog parks. They have much shorter fences that are less like opposing looking. And they're a great space for meeting other dog owners. And if you're looking at locations, and I don't know if these are open, because I know that Key Route is being considered for a pathway, but I just walked through there the other day and I thought to myself, a small dog park could fit right nicely in between all these beautiful trees. Or there are a lot of spaces on the greenway that might be potential spaces for that, but I do think there's something nice about having that as a separate area, and I also feel like it doesn't take that much space to make a small dog park. So just my notes for you all.
Thank you.
And then I think I shared some pictures with the group of, including the Berkeley Dog Park on Hearst, which somebody mentioned. Its hours are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekends and holidays. So those kind of hours seemed good. It had the large dog area right next to the small dog area. And it had even more neighbors than what we have in Section B. It has the people across the street on Hearst, like we have people across the street from Section B. But it also had, just on the other side of a fence, like where we have the ballpark, there's this apartment building with who knows how many hundreds or dozens of people, dozens of families right there. And so then it works for them. They also had banners up that said things like, big banners saying, hush constantly barking dogs, things like that. So to get people to help each other, to police themselves and each other. And also it didn't say anything about closed during the winter or close. It was all wood chipped for the large dog park. So the fact that the Section B is closed, 6 months out of the year and only open at 11 a.m. Seems, I would look forward to seeing a year-round dog park that's open like the Berkeley hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
I have some questions that are a little different. I guess based on what one of the public commenters said about the survey techniques, I'm wondering if the City of Albany has a way to survey all residents or figure out a way to do it more broadly and not just around the Section B area, because having a dog park might impact other parks or other, it's not just the people as the presenter said, we're right there, but you might choose to go to that dog park instead of to Berkeley or something. So I'd love to see the subcommittee kind of gather research from more people. And then additional to that, I'm interested in what kinds of questions you're planning to ask, and wondering if there's the potential for commissioners who are not on the committee to submit some potential questions. But I'd love to hear what exactly you are planning to ask and how to get it out to more people.
Shelley, I guess.
Can I make one comment to follow on that, just to the same question, which is, I think I understood the comment a little differently, which was, what about the people in El Cerrito that come here, or the people in other communities, which to me is slightly different than what you're saying. I feel like it's, while I'm happy for people to use the parks in Albany from outside the area, and in fact, I go to Richmond and Berkeley to parks all the time, I think what I'm most concerned about in terms of our responsibility is to the folks in Albany to make sure that we're best meeting their needs with the dog park. So I just wanted to clarify that I heard that a little differently, so as you answer.
That's what I heard too, but I just, that's part of why I thought if we are able to survey people in Albany more broadly, then we're better able to represent our city's needs.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different ways we can do it. We could, honestly, we could use all of your help trying to distribute those surveys to your networks. I know a lot of people have like neighborhood email lists, that kind of thing. That's going to be more effective. I actually work at a consulting firm that does surveys, and they're like so difficult to get people to answer. So it's lucky if somebody actually even clicks on the link to the survey. I think it makes sense to have something at section B where you can maybe have a box and you drop in, but there's also like problems with, are people over, duplicating the survey? But also, I don't think it should just be limited to even the dog users. I think there's a lot of reasons that even non-dog owners appreciate dog parks, like parents of small children, and anyway, so there's reasons to, definitely make it widespread, and any ideas you have or any ways to distribute to your own networks might be a really good way. The other thing, just to let you know what we were thinking about in terms of the surveys for the immediate neighbors, and by the way, when we say immediate, we're going like wide. I kind of talked with the others, and like, this is going to take a lot of our time going door to door. We're thinking not only Carmel Avenue, right where the Portland to Thousand Oaks is basically the block that it's on. Also, all of Thousand Oaks, also San Carlos, parallel. So, I think usually the same neighbors often comment. This will give us a broader sense. And the reason we decided to do door-to-door was so we could really get their unique opinion. If you kind of have a group, sometimes one strong opinion or one strong speaker kind of overwhelms the discussion. So we really are committed to getting to the truth of how the neighborhood feels, and I suspect it's more nuanced than the sort of the single voices that we hear. But who knows? We want to hear those voices, and we want people to really feel comfortable expressing their concerns so they can be considered, because it is going to impact them more than any. So, yeah.
I guess ideas that I have, for other organizations I've worked for, we will do a mass mailing that can be really expensive. So I don't know if that's something on the table. Putting something on the Park and Rec website that's like a e-survey that asks the same questions could also achieve that goal. And then also some sort of flyers or something, or the surveys around town at places that are City of Albany, so here at City Hall or at the library, or other ways to hopefully interact with other people that might see it. And I personally feel like it's a pretty emotional issue for a lot of people, and so I'm hoping that means that more people will actually answer the survey than sometimes some of the dry stuff that I ask about in my position, like habitat management.
I just wanted to make a comment about two widely attended events that are coming up. Number one is National Night Out on August 7th, where communities have block parties all around the city, and the other is Dinner with Albany, which will be coming up at the end of September. I think that National Night Out, because you have block captains, there's a whole structure in place there where people are gathering with their neighbors. If you had a survey or some kind of even informational page about you're doing it, or something that there might be a mechanism by which to pick the 30 block captains and ask that, or have people take them around. I'm happy to put it out on my block, but that might draw, a wider cross-section of feedback from people in Albany, and there's already a time and a specific time, and it's coming up in a good time frame if the survey were ready or questions
Yeah,
were
I mean,
ready.
I think that's going to be a question of staff resources, our subcommittee resources. We can talk about how we might implement something like that. I think it's a great idea. I just think, I think it's already a lot of time that we're going to spend on those door to door, and so I just don't want to overcommit. But I think it's a great idea. I mean,
And there's an email list, because anyone that's a block captain, that's the organizer for the block thing, is already getting emails about that night. So that's the only reason I mention it, is that's through the police department, so I'm not sure how.
oh, it's the police.
Yeah,
Police.
there's the community
Shelley,
officer.
your department doesn't administer that one? I thought you did for some reason.
The National Night Out?
Yeah.
No, the police, it's a police.
Oh. Well, I
situation.
guess.
Well, we can work on that, and
It's just a suggestion, just because I know there's like a lot of block parties in Albany that night, but.
Yeah, the city has a SurveyMonkey account, so we're going to put it online, so that link can be shared out through various channels, so.
That sounds good. Is it also a way to post at the door of Section B so that people know, people that frequent it know that something's coming, even our own meetings, to give input?
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I think the part about the stuffing the box, with extra, but the nice thing about SurveyMonkey is that it's per, IP address.
Email, okay.
So you can respond once. So if we're giving the link, please take the survey when you get
I was
home.
just talking about a flyer, and it could even have the link on it.
What comes up a lot, with the organizations I work with, is not everybody has the link, and so making sure that there's some other, for people who don't get on the internet, that they can also participate is important.
The library, I mean, putting paper copies of the library in other places, City Hall, maybe, I don't know where exactly, but.
I wanted to mention the water stations. Some people brought up, and that would certainly be something that wherever we have a dog park, the Parks Commission would be interested in having, water facilities. As a resident, I was involved with the providing feedback on how to spend the sugar-sweetened beverage tax, and that was referred to. And one thing people should keep in mind is that my understanding is that where the water stations are being put in now is just the first year's funds, and so long as people are still drinking sugary beverages, and you should encourage all your friends to drink sugary beverages so we have more money for this, then there will be more rounds of funding of watering stations, and I think a dog park would be a natural thing for that.
There is a bottle filler station going in at Memorial Park. It's replacing the existing water fountain on the bathroom facility. Yeah. There's already two, so we're just replacing where we have water fountains already. Remember, it's Section B. Yeah. If you're a dog user at Terrace Park, that is a double fountain there. There's a lot of dogs that just run there. Yeah.
Well, and sorry, the other thing to mention in terms of our strategy is also to reach out in a meaningful way to dog users who have, so it's one, this door-to-door with Section B neighbors, two, this public survey, but also three other sort of working groups with very interested parties. So we haven't defined that piece yet, but there's going to be more than just the survey for dog users to have more of a say in their, to be able to express themselves with all the issues that we're talking about.
I just want to thank our subcommittee members. It sounds like this is a meaty and important issue, and there's a lot of public interest. Thank you all for making your comments.
Thank you. So, anything else?
Do they make one for just poop?
Yeah.
Genie.
Okay, thank you. So, does anybody else have any comments? No? Okay. So I think we'll just do the next one is 6.4, measure our projects. Commission will review project estimates, discuss how to evaluate projects that don't have a fully developed estimate, and create budget ranges for projects if necessary. And I asked Shelley to add this to the agenda,
And I don't even know if we need to go that deep into this. We keep on, we do keep on talking about this, which I think we should. But I just wanted to ask that question and sort of just talk about that a little bit, because it seems like when we say yes to the bocce court, we're saying yes without a fully developed estimate. And so, well, I guess with that one it may not be. But anyway, just how are we going to move forward? Or maybe, I don't know. Anyway, how do we move forward when the estimates are not, they're rarely going to be that fixed, right, Shelley? Because these contractors can change and we may not know. But so even for ones that we may have some idea about, but they go like 10,000 over or 20,000 over, how do we deal with that? And do we need to deal with that? It's just an open question as we think about these.
Can I ask one question? Did your packet have the chart in it that I printed for you, or is it missing? You have
it is inside.
Okay, good. Mine's missing. I was going to apologize.
This one?
No, I got it up here, but I just wanted to make sure that it made it.
And just another point is sometimes, with the mountain bike park, we actually have to pay money, right, to even get the estimate. So it's really, I think, tricky.
That's why, I think I explained that before. Some of these, unless let's move forward with figuring that one out, I don't want to spend money because that takes away. So sometimes you'll get these guesstimates in a range for them until it gets a little more confirmation that it's something to move forward with. So the small updates I have from the last time you saw this, we did the bocce. So the top part of the chart is the ones you guys have approved to move forward. So the tennis court lighting and the bocce courts. The update from the mountain bike is that we met, and Commissioner Martin was there, with the designer and Mr. Russell, who has been the proponent of the bike park. And the designer will be working on that design over August to get it ready for September. And the point of that is to have a concept with cost estimates and options so we know what we're even talking about. And if we can move forward in a way with Caltrans, if we can propose to them what we'd like to use that site for, because we don't even know that part yet. And I think if I could have us, because we've been kind of about some of the ones that are down in the bottom, is really focusing on the issue with Peggy Thompson Pierce Street Park about the field section that we only had enough money to put in the hydro seeding, and that's hard for people because after the wildflowers died, it doesn't look very nice out there. It is in phase. When council approved a phased approach to Pierce Street Park in terms of what was going to go in there, and the first phase for the amount of money we had was to put in the playground, the walking path getting down there, grading the field to get it ready, and then hydro seeding and the extra parking, and that was, just over $1 million. I think it was like 1.1. And we didn't have any more funds for it. But in phase 2 and the future phases is to put in grass, or if it's turf, in that middle area. And that's been really a number one thing that's come up that people really want to see. It'll make it feel more like a park. And I bring this up because this could be a big chunk of just Measure R, of contributing this to whatever that cost estimate comes out for, if it's artificial turf or regular grass in that area. And I really could see council leaning towards just saying, we're going to move the remaining amount of money towards this project. I mean, that could be a reality for us. And so we have a meeting about the feasibility study that we're going to go through to see what's up with the turf space. And that is next week with the Public Works Director and the City Manager and Robert, just to get a game plan of what we're going to do. And then I'll have more information for you on that. But I think that's a really big contender for a lot of this money. It's a council member requested us to do the research on this, and I think they're going to probably lean that way. We're not going to have enough to do it, so the issue will be, are there other available funds that we can contribute to complete that project?
So if we allocate some of the other things now or soon, that would diminish the amount of money in the Measure R fund?
It would. I mean, all of the projects have to go to council for approval anyways. So we'd be recommending, like, here's what we're saying we want to spend this money on. Yeah.
What is the differential between turf and grass? Because I did go by there and I was like, that does look really bad. And it is such a beautiful, big, wide open space that would be so nice for so many people that live over there. But it's hard to, with my tiny plot of land, it's hard for me to even understand how it can cost that much money to put grass.
I know. I feel the same way. The estimate that was in the, when we finished the design and that council saw, that we didn't go through with, but putting irrigation in and putting in grass in that area was just over $400,000. Yeah. So that was for grass.
Turf is actually a savings.
No, I think artificial turf will be a lot more. Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay, because I don't really, I'm not a fan of turf.
Yeah. And if you go back in the history, so went through a really long planning process with a lot of public input, and they had working groups, and it went to council a number of times because it started back in 2012, and we had a lot of bumps in there to actually get it to being open. But in 2013, it was the request to have it be a multi-use field, and then there were some requests that it could be a sports field, but there was mainly people were leaning towards it just being open space for people to use it. But it is sized big enough for if you're trying to gauge like a under 9 soccer field, but it's not much bigger than that. So then that's a square, a rectangle, but there is grass that's around that area. But if you were to say we can run under 9 soccer on this field, it could handle that.
But also a grassy area, I feel like would allow for park activation, for community gathering. I mean, I know a lot of those things happen at Memorial Park, but there are a lot of people that live in those Pierce Street, in that corridor, that it might be nice to have some grassy space where you could have music, or you could have something that would be more of a community gathering space than it is right now.
Yeah, and in a few of those design drawings, and Aileen can contribute to this, was a lower plaza. Once you're in the park, that there would be some sort of little plaza down there. But also there were lots of great ideas that people wanted to just be able to do in a grassy space. Obviously, just like you're saying, a number of the neighbors were in those working groups, so they got to give their ideas. But, meditation areas, and they discussed community gardens, they discussed dog areas. They went through the whole range of items. I mean, so calling it a multi-use field, I think, was the easiest way to define it. Yeah.
So it sounds like if council over the next month is going to be making a decision as to whether or not they want us to prioritize this, or if they're going to tell us that the funding should go towards it, we should hold off on prioritizing and looking at some of these other items until they make that decision.
I think that because mountain bike is coming, we should have some sort of guesstimate on that, but it's still an unknown because of the facility area that we're trying to use. Council would still have to approve that. But I think if we could get the study done, the analysis done, that needs to be done, then you'll have all the information.
What do you mean for the turf?
The turf field, yes.
$10,000 to $15,000. So
yeah.
But so here's the question: is I guess I'm wondering, like, for the other recommendations we've made, has that already gone to council as a recommendation? Are we holding off on? What are we?
No, the bocce courts, when we're ready to actually move that forward, it goes forward with a recommendation of the funding source.
Oh, I see.
It was in the CIP project, so it's already been approved in the CIP, but the funding source part would need to be approved, and that would go.
Then it's just like a small little.
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, I think it makes sense for us to approve what our priorities are for how to spend the Measure R money, and let the council decide if they want to shoot those down or not. If they decide proactively they want to say no to all of our recommendations so they have more money for turf, that would be up to them, but at least they would see what our priorities are. Those would be presented to them before they would be able to carve out money.
Yeah, I like that idea. Sort of be proactive about it. And then, they can choose whether or not to agree with us, right?
Yes, exactly. We're just missing those big pieces.
Got it. So we're like the mountain bike park in terms of funding.
Mm-hmm.
When you say we just ask them for it to go, do you need any, like for the bocce court, do you need to do anything more with that in order to get it approved by council? Or is this good enough, what you have?
No, it would be a staff report that would go to council.
Yeah, but so it's good enough right now to, I mean, that's just, if you wanted to, for whatever reason, shepherd that item alone, you could without having to present detailed plans.
It's
Okay,
already in the capital improvement project plan that's been approved, putting the bocce court at Oceanview. It just had a different funding source, so where we would be, yeah.
Got it, sorry, and sorry to get into the weeds, but just wondering, like, so for example, the mountain bike park, we couldn't necessarily do that in the same way because it hasn't been approved in the capital improvement plan, right?
Correct, yes.
And so what do you need to move that one forward? First, the estimate, right?
Yeah, we don't know what it would cost. And then once we know that cost estimate and the ranges and what would go in there, he gave us a basic idea.
He said he would do like a low, medium, and high kind of, yeah.
There's a bit more information we need to get in order to be able to say this is one of our recommendations. And that whole Caltrans piece is just the mystery, because council would have to approve us using, if Caltrans said yes, council would still need to approve us doing the project in that space. That is up to them to decide. So we're just kind of preparing in order to be able to say, hey, Caltrans, would you even be interested or allow or be to us move forward with this space?
Right.
And then
So if we voted to move forward with it, then the city could approach Caltrans?
Yes. We'll have to figure out that timing. Is it that we're basically putting together like a business plan for Caltrans of how we're proposing to use the space and what would go in there and what would be required to change the space and what are the limits of our use, and then they would probably be leasing that land to us to use.
I have a question. What's the additional fitness EQ?
I added in, there's come up a few times. Before we had it in the national fitness campaign of adding equipment, which the commission wasn't really interested in that approach, but not necessarily against adding additional fitness equipment, similar to what's in the Greenway. And also during the Greenway planning process, we settled on a fitness court for cost savings, but there was always this idea that you could add additional stations along the Greenway if the commission had money and decided they wanted to move in that direction.
Do you know how much that part of the Greenway's improvement cost?
It's hard to say because of the fact, we had to do a number of things in that space, including the surfacing and then the installation of equipment. But those pieces of equipment range between $8,000 and $10,000 a piece. So it just depends on what you're selecting. So I'd have to try to figure out, based on the numbers that we had, and calculate, like, if you're only putting in a push-up station, like how big that square has to be in the installation, and to give you an estimate.
And you said the commission wasn't supportive of expanding into a different area or
for the National Fitness Campaign proposal, which we were talking about possibly.
I remember that.
Pierce Street Park.
Of
adding a couple stations in there as fitness equipment. Maybe we could look at it.
So this came from when we had when they did the retrofitting, the old parkour equipment or parcourse. Is it parcourse?
A parcourse, yes.
Parcourse equipment had to be removed. And that stuff was put in before the ADA requirements were necessary. And so reinstalling it was going to be a lot more expensive because you had to redo the whole surface. And so that was, we had people coming to our meetings, like almost every meeting, we had representatives saying, like, we use this equipment all the time, you have to put it back in. And so we ended up putting it back in as a court in front of the senior center.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well used. I see people using it all the time.
But people loved the paracourse equipment that was all spread out. We had lots of people coming to our meetings saying, please put it back in.
Okay.
So I think that's what this is.
Okay.
In the 80s, people put a lot of those in, and they kind of got so outdated. I remember because, you can do the pull-ups here, you can do the whatever there. But I think the thing that we looked at also had a community grant component where there was a national community partnership or whatever. But it sounded like we didn't aesthetically like that one, or there was questions about, is that really utilized? What does it look like? And I didn't know if we actually said no to it, but rather that we were just not totally sold on that particular approach.
Right. The National Fitness Campaign package deal, because it could be accomplished by doing the same type of thing we did in the Illinois Greenway on a smaller scale.
One thing is the fencing isn't a very, sexy kind of like flashy thing, but it has a safety component, and And it is disappointing that the school district says they've cut back on what they're willing to pay, but that still might be something that we would want to move forward.
The fencing. I don't mean to open up a can of worms, but just curious about if there, we never had a design for that, did we? Maybe it's just pretty straight up, but.
We kind of had a snag in the situation because the fencing contractor that the school district wanted to use was just going to put up the fencing. Our city engineer asked him to provide the engineering on some of those poles, which would have been really important.
They were saying that it was going to be really cheap, right? I remember that.
Yeah, so
that changed.
Yeah, we'd have to put it out to bid to get actual
just
engineering design and,
Right. I see. So it's that's why it's much more than we expect. Or it's just, I remember now. Yes, because they were just going to pick up the labor and all the other.
Right, and not make sure that the poles that are already there could handle the extra weight, and that is important, obviously. But this quote would include that center field issue where we have those neighbors that have balls that get hit off their roofs and cars. And that wasn't included in the original plan for just doing the right field fence and over at the tennis court side of adding additional fencing there.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, I guess this brings up an example of how things can change, right, very quickly if we approve something and then things change. I guess one of the questions that I have is how firm do we need that quote to be before we bring it to council?
Well, if you said we need to move forward with the fencing, then I jump into, we need to move forward with the fencing, and we work with Public Works. We put it out to bid to get designs and the estimates so people actually bid on the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would mostly just get a firmer number back to us if we approved it now? Or if we
It would get you a firmer number. Then you're having to pay to have, well, no, if you're just getting estimates, it would be fine.
I do have one question, though, because I walked by there after.
Yeah.
And it just looks like there's two huge trees that are halfway in the field, and that they're very, very tall evergreens, and basically, John, you know what I'm talking about.
They're on the outside of the fence.
Thousand Oaks.
On the outside of the fence.
They're on the outside of the fence, but half of it has grown into that.
Right.
And I don't know that, maybe they could just be pushed, but I just assume that looks like it needs to be chopped. It almost looks like it would be the whole half side of the tree would need to be chopped.
Where is this?
At Thousand Oaks, right at that, the Thousand Oaks side.
Oh.
I think she's saying where the fence would go up.
Where the fence
There's
would go
trees in the
there's no
branch.
They're actually, well, it's funny because they actually provide protection now.
Oh, we want those. Those are the ones that are good.
Right,
But it's not that section. It's just past that, there's a gap, and that's the reason, is that there's this new gap where there used to be tall trees. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. But with the fencing, okay, so you wouldn't cut back that tree in order, you would just do it around the tree? Because, okay, I'm sorry, maybe I just am not sure, I'm not clear where it would be. Okay. So
Cut down some trees, and there's a gap in the fence. That's where the trees are growing over. That's where those trees used to be, is where the fence would be extended.
Okay, and then the rest of the other side of the fence would not in that, okay. Kind of funny.
Do contractors need to know the money's committed, or can we just vote today to get some bids?
If you want me to push for that with Public Works to send the fencing out to bid, that's what I can do. Yes. Then we would have an estimate for what it would cost. Then we would be moving forward with proposing that to council to approve the funding source and for us to do the project, basically.
But we don't know the cost right now for the mountain bike. If we don't have the cost for everything, then we would be pushing ahead the fence above the mountain bike or above the turf field.
But what do we still have, how much? 240. And has he given a ballpark for what the mountain biking thing would be? It was under 100, right?
I thought I remembered 60 to 80 as.
Well, he said that. That's why we're having him do because he suggested a few different approaches. One is dirt. Some parts have some asphalt. Some are pre-made products that would maybe last longer. So he's going to propose kind of the Cadillac side and the not Cadillac side. There you go. If I might make a suggestion, is maybe give us this August recess to try to get this, mountain bike should be ready by September, I'm anticipating, and we're having a meeting next week about doing the turf study, that we might actually have some numbers so you can look at everything, and then maybe go with that approach of like ranking them based on, well, this one's really safety, this is a really big community need, this is and give an explanation for council why you're recommending them. I just, sometimes, there's part of me that you don't want to go through all this work and then have it not be a priority for them.
I agree. The other thing I would say is dog park. Is that within reason for being used, Measure R?
The response from the city attorney was that one would be a stretch for.
So, okay, well then that makes it easier to not necessarily propose to include it. Because I was just saying, I mean, that's, to me, it kind of feels like, oh no, we're giving, what if there's something else comes up that we really want to do? You know, it's just.
For example, I'm still sad that the, volleyball court was removed, or will be removed if the bocce court's going, but part of why I think it's not very well used is that it's behind the trees and like this park that's far from everybody, because I know a lot of people like playing volleyball, or I really love badminton, and so because we're thinking about play fields, it would be interesting to think about, is there a place where you can remove that or revive it, where it might be better used?
Well, like the bocce ball. Yeah, like what about key?
Well, bocce ball or a volleyball like net somewhere, or even poles,
or create a volleyball court somewhere.
We have, I mean, I will say, unfortunately, there is not a lot of volleyball that happens back there, but it's for other reasons, because it's not a flat surface. We actually did rent it to a youth group that ran practices out there. It was a volleyball, and now they're inside. They're one of our programs, but it's just not a flat surface. Yeah.
Or some other surface, you know, like I know all of the tennis courts get used, but if there's a way where it's like you can have taller poles and people bring a net or lift up a net or something so that you can repurpose it would be interesting. But again, I don't want to like add more to the list. I just thought that's a play field that now we're missing at all.
Yeah, and we'd be replacing it with a different type of play field that is in its heightened, people are doing this now. I will say that we've had a lot of rentals in that area, more than we have at any other time for picnics. But we also run adult sports out there 5 nights a week. So we have activity in that park all the time. And it could very well be a league that the Recreation Department runs, because there's a need for that. And you can run some other leagues too, which are a little more in that range, like cornhole leagues, and which sounds silly, but it's actually kind of a fun, universal sport, right? So the interesting part of when we were going through that planning process for that park, when we renovated it, was that where the community garden was supposed to be a bocce court at one time. So even back then, it was in the planning for that space. So I'm hoping that that's actually the bocce will actually draw people there, because people like to play.
And it is like very full most of the time.
Yeah.
One of the items was the parking, and I've definitely tried to go there and not.
Yeah, you can't.
One question I had about things like a scoreboard. In some other communities, I've noticed like a sign that says the Lions Club or the Rotary Club. Do we ever do public-private partnerships for some of these smaller items that maybe there would be a partner that would want to come forward and help do something like that? Or has that not been our modus?
We haven't done any real things where it's like a sponsorship or someone pays for something. We don't really list sponsors necessarily in the city, but this is where that gifts to the city comes in, where if there's a group that wants to, let's say the Little League has a scoreboard they want to donate, and then we are going to provide the installation for it. Those happen a lot. As long as that field, because it's used by a number of different user groups, would all have access to the scoreboard, would be the only thing we'd want it to be. Yeah. So that is a possibility with that scoreboard. There would be an installation cost of putting in a scoreboard at that location.
I have no sense of these numbers. If I made up the numbers in my head, they'd be way off, because grass costs $400,000. And I'm like, what?
I know.
On the turf note, though, like I totally get it. It's hot, like, it gets really hot when kids go on it, but it does save irrigation costs. So it's, good for drought, and it really reduces maintenance. So if you need to go on like mow or replace grass, or often you'll get a patch where people use a lot and then reseed it. So I totally understand wanting to have something more organic, but there are, it does have its value.
Yeah.
I think it has great value for sports. My problem is that I look at that big space in this beautiful new park that we've made, and I imagine it as a place where a family can put down a blanket, a place where you can just toss the football, or your baby can crawl around or whatever. And I don't experience turf to be very pleasant for any of those kind of uses. So I look at like Live Oak Park and some of these other parks where my husband and I will go and enjoy it in the afternoon with all these other people. And most of those people are not actually playing Pee Wee soccer, even though you could in that grassy space play that. So that's my only thinking, but I totally agree with you from a sports perspective and from environmentally, like I understand that there's less water impact.
So then it sounds like at the September meeting, we'll be thinking about how to, really prioritize and then present to the city, and that we'll have a lot more information to finally kind of do that process. We're hoping.
Yes, that's my goal.
Yeah, that'll be really helpful. I think that makes sense to prioritize it that
Yeah,
way.
I mean, it takes a village. So we have a
Shelley.
lot of big projects going through Public Works right now, so I just have to get in line is really the thing, and try to not overwhelm them at the same time. So each one of these things takes a lot of staff time in terms of sending things out to bid and getting information. And so, when you guys say, like, these are the ones we really, really want, that at least gives me a goal to narrow down the list.
I'm excited to hear more about the mountain or the bike park.
Yeah.
Also, I'm excited that there's a recess.
A
what?
Yeah, so so we're not meeting in August. So our next meeting will be, because this is our last item, right?
Yes.
So our last item will be, next meeting will be September.
And could I just ask, in terms of future agenda items, I would love for us to talk about the community garden, not just because she raised it, but also because I'm aware that it's been an ongoing thing and we haven't talked about it while I've been here, I don't think. And I'm aware that's not a play field, but I wondered about funding available for that move or for an adjustment or for any of those kind of projects. So if we could talk about that in September, that would be super helpful.
Yes, I have a lot of information about it. Yes.
Great, okay. So we'll add that. Just so you know, I'm planning to have an update or maybe something for us to vote on for the city tree removal procedures.
I'm not here for the September meeting, so if there's any way I can participate elsewise, and otherwise I'll just...
Yeah, I won't be either, so that might want to check who's going to be around.
Okay, well, we can talk about doing it in October also, but.
Okay.
Okay.
If we don't have enough people, that's good to know. So you guys know for sure. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Have a good summer, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
For the agenda? Oh, go ahead.